adventurers, and welcome to Skill Tree, where we learn how to do just about everything. Okay, so whether you are out just camping or engaging in glorious combat on the field of battle, there's one thing you absolutely need to survive. No, it is not bug spray, nor is it your finest plate armor. It is instead a crucial chemical known as dihydrogen monoxide, otherwise known as H2O, or it's water. It's water. I'm making water sound more important than it is. I mean, it is the most vital thing to survive, so I guess it's pretty important. Anyway, seriously, in the last LARP event I went to, it was like 95 degrees and people having like heat stroke was an actual issue. It is super important that you stay hydrated, especially when you're doing anything physical out in the heat. The problem is you don't always want to carry around like a plastic water bottle or something, right? And if you engage in something like LARP, even a nice looking metal water bottle or whatever really kind of breaks the immersion a little bit. That's why today we're gonna learn how to make one of these fancy leather water bottles. I believe it's called a Costrel, I'm pretty sure that. It's a super fun and easy project to do if you're into like LARPing, or honestly, if you just want something that looks really cool. But before I move on and actually teach you this skill, I want to call your attention to the fancy new thanks button that YouTube decided to give me. This guy is a brand new feature that allows you to donate a few bucks if you like what I do here. You obviously don't have to, I really appreciate you just watching my content. But if you felt like buying me a coffee, or let's be honest, a bit more whiskey, I just want to let you know, it's there. Speaking of which, I only have so much left in this little cup of mine, so let's move along and level up this skill. All right, so while looking up how to make one of these things, I first thought about kind of buying a template. They're pretty simple, and I figured, why waste the time? But then I thought to myself, these are pretty simple. Why waste the money? Honestly, you could just make your own, and you can make it whatever shape you want. Like, the classical design consists of this kind of rounded body with the little handles on it, but you can really make it any type of weird shape that you're into. For this operation though, I decided to go with our classic kind of Costrel rounded water bottle. To get started, I first folded up a piece of paper right down the middle. I'm just doing this so right after I cut out my shape, I can just unfold it and it's gonna be symmetrical. To make that rounded body shape, I just busted out this compass, butting the point of it against the edge so that I can draw this perfect half circle. Not a big deal if you don't have a compass, you can just use the edge of a plate or anything else that's circular. For the neck of my bottle, I used this French curve just to give me a really smooth transition. I also used the rounded end of that curve just to make the shape of the handle. Again, the French curve isn't important, you can just freehand it if that's what you want to do. In fact, that's exactly what I did for these little transitions here, just to make everything nice and smooth. Finally, I used my compass to mark out where I wanted the holes in my handles to go. With that outline to my liking, I erased all of those inner lines, just leaving me with the outside shape. So since this thing is going to be made out of like two pieces of leather sandwiched together, I need to sew around the edges of it to hold it all, together. So with that in mind, I decided to freehand my stitch lines about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, all the way around the cavity that I want the water to sit in, as well as around those handles just to keep them together and to strengthen them up a bit. With my layout all laid out, that's what I decided to go with on my script. Good job, nice, have more of this. I went ahead and cut the whole thing out with my X-Acto knife. And again, doing it this way gave me a perfectly symmetrical template to work from. Now this one template is actually gonna give me both sides because they have to be exactly the same. So basically I just cut 2 of them out of the leather and then I stick them together. Speaking of the leather, I am using this sweet 8-ounce veg tan for this project. And after cutting out the first one, I decided to use it as a template for the second half just to make sure they're exactly identical. And it's at this point that you can either start putting it together or take some creative liberties and actually like design and tool into the leather. Since this particular bottle is specifically going from my Ranger Gareth's kit, I wanted to make something that's very specifically him. So to that end, I asked Maddie to make me something and she came up with this badass design that holds a few secret images important to my character. Seriously, yo, it took her like 10 minutes, not even, to throw that together. She's really good at what she does. Now to get my image onto that leather, I did the usual thing of wetting it down, then covering it over with some plastic wrap to protect the paper so that I can use a stylus to trace the image in place. I say I did it, but Maddie was actually visiting that week, so I figured I'd put her to work and let her try her hand at some leather working. Look at her go, trying her very best and leveling up skills. I'm so proud, It gets so big so fast. Seriously though, she did a really good job. Look at how clean those lines are. And with that image in place, it was time to bring in the swivel knife and make it permanent. We also decided to frame the whole thing in with this diamond shape just to separate it from the rest of the background a little bit more. Then I made the whole thing pop by using my bevel tool to make the design stick out a bit and filling in that background with the aptly named background tool. And this came out super slick. I really love how that design came out, and adding the diamond and then the backgrounder tool really brought the rest of that design forward. I'm very happy with those choices. That came out good. All right, so with that in place, it's time to actually stick this whole thing together and start making it a, you know, a Costrel. I always say it wrong. But this right here is why I roughed in those stitch lines on my template. Using them as a guide, I was able to trace them onto the flesh side of the leather. This gives me a clear border where I can apply some contact adhesive that will keep it on the opposite sides of my stitches. And a quick note on this, I am sure there is somebody in the comment section right now just typing about how toxic barge cement is and how I'm a moron for letting it anywhere near my water, or something along those lines. I see you doing it. You can stop, I promise. I understand. I'm going to be sealing the inside of this, and should the water ever get past that seal, it'll leak out of those lace lines before it ever really touches that glue. In fact, almost all the ones that I've seen on like how to make this, make it with some sort of glue on the outside, and I haven't seen anything saying there are issues or people are getting poisoned or any such thing. I've also read the associated safety data sheets, and I have assessed this to be acceptable risk for me. That being said, contact cement or barge cement or whatever is toxic. It is not something you want to inhale, and it is not something you want to ingest. So if that's an issue for you or a sticking point, you don't have to use it. You can just skip right over and just stitch it together. There's also a product called Tanner's tape, I believe it's called. It's like a double-sided tape, where if you want it to stick together while you stitch it to make it easier, you could use that, though I don't know if that's toxic or not. I haven't looked up. Anywho, with that disclaimer out of the way and my two sides carefully cemented together, I decided to hit the edges with my belt sander just to get everything nice and even. I also use my Dremel for just inside of the holes of the handle. You can 100% just do this with some sandpaper. It's not very hard. I just have a lot of video to shoot, and this makes it a lot faster. Now, once those edges are looking crispy and beautiful, I went over them with my edge beveler just to round them off a bit and make them look more professional. All right, so from here on out, I need to drop some lines so I know where to actually stitch it, right? Or else I'm gonna go all over the place. I don't stitch straight without lines to follow. So to do this, I just busted out my wing divider and traced all around the outside edges just a little bit further from where I knew the glue lines were. I also used my stylus to trace in around those handles as well. This leaves me with this nice line that will create the cavity as well as reinforce those handles. With those in place, I just used a pronged hole punch to set my stitch holes. And there's something about this part of the project that I really love the look of. Like if you've ever gotten leather kits or any kind of stitching kits or whatever, this is kind of the position they come in with all the holes, and they want you to start practicing your stitching or whatever. But for some reason, I never see my own stuff as professional, so whenever I get that kind of thing, or get to this phase in the project, it just looks like that thing, and it just makes it feel, at this point, like it is a very professional looking thing to me. I don't know. It's a head trick, but I love it. Anywho, the stitch that I'm using to connect this together is just your basic saddle stitch. I have covered this a bunch of times on this channel, but if you need a refresher, you can check out this video right here that's just specifically about it. Now, as you can see, I did the whole perimeter of where the water is gonna sit, just to make sure that that is one consistent seal all the way around. Then I went back in and did the handles separately. And with that, this baby's ready to be shaped into the bottle it was always meant to be. So in order for this water bottle to, you know, hold water, it's going to need that middle section between the two pieces of leather to be formed into a cavity. And this is where the stretchy properties of leather can really shine. So first, to make that nice and flexible, we want to submerge it completely into some water and leave it there for a couple of minutes just to make sure the water soaks all the way through. In fact, while it was in there, I was kind of pressing on the sides and opening the mouth of it so that I'd let water in. This way I can make sure that it's soaked completely through. And once it was completely soaked, it was time to bust out the popcorn kernels. Though you can use lentils, beans, really whatever you got laying around, but they should have kind of the smooth edge like popcorn kernels have. These are basically going to be used to take up that space inside of the cavity, but if you have things with too many sharp edges or whatever, you might have like dents pushing out from your leather, right? Anyways, to use it, all you do is you pour them into that open cavity, and then use a stick, or in my case a bar here, just to go ahead and compact them into place. Doing this causes the spacing between the two pieces of leather to stretch open into this nice rounded shape. I also put this cork into place to make sure the mouth of the bottle was shaped perfectly to accept it. Then I left the leather to dry for 24 hours. This is another really cool thing about leather, because not only can you shape it and mold it and kind of add designs to it while it's wet, but once it dries, it stays in whatever position you put it in. So for example, once this was dry, I was able to dump out all of those popcorn kernels, and as you can see, it holds that bottle shape perfectly. And with that all in shape, I just wet down the surface of it a little bit so that I can accept this saddle tan dye nice and evenly. Now you don't have to dye it. In fact, the way we're gonna seal it later on is gonna darken up that leather quite a bit. So if you like that natural kind of honey color that natural leather is, you can just leave it as is and it's gonna darken just a bit and look really nice. But I really wanted this to be kind of a really rich, dark color. That said, as nice as that does look, I did want this design to pop out just a little bit more. To do that, I just hit it with some of this antiquing gel. By applying this to the bottle and then brushing it off immediately, all of the tooled in textured areas collect more of that dye and thus get darker, making them stand out more. And this thing is looking slick. Look how cool that came out. I love how that makes the whole design kind of pop. It looks so good here. Okay, so to make this thing actually watertight, I decided to seal it with some beeswax. Now you could also use like brewer's pitch or pine pitch or something like that for this as well. I just researched a whole bunch of like leather crafters forums, and for this project, most of them recommend using beeswax, so I'm just kind of going with what the professionals say. Now for my beeswax, I was able to secure this amazing block from a local apiary. When you use beeswax of any kind to seal a bottle or like the inside of a cup or whatever, you can still smell it, like you can always smell it, and you can sometimes taste it in your water. And this beeswax smells amazing. So if I'm gonna be drinking out of this thing and I'll be able to smell it, something that smells that good, totally seal the deal for me. Not only that, but I get to support my local bees. The bee economy has been down lately, and I really wanna make sure they're supported okay. Their little jobs, trying to make their little ends meet, pay their little rent. Poor little guys. So after breaking that wax up into manageable chunks, I just melted it with a double boiler. And while I was waiting for that to melt, I used a hair dryer to get the colostrum nice and warm. Doing this is gonna allow me a little bit more time to work with the wax inside of it before it starts to harden. Now you could do this in your oven on like the lowest setting, but mine in the past has burnt leather. It gets way hotter than it says on the dial. And I really didn't want to risk damaging this thing, so I decided to do it with my hair dryer. With everything melted and warmed up, I just started pouring that beeswax into the costrol and swishing it around to make sure it coats all of the inside. The goal here is to continue doing this, letting the hot wax permeate through all of the leather. You'll know this is happening when you start to see the outside of that leather darken. This indicates that the beeswax has made it all the way through to the other side of the leather. Once I was happy that the whole cavity had been completely permeated, I then applied more wax to the outside edges of the handles. Don't worry if the wax gets a little bit messy on the outside, as you can just go back in with a heat gun or even your hair dryer to remelt it and then buff it all out to a nice shine. The wax is also really good for slicking the edges down as well. And once it was all buffed, this thing looks super nice. I love that low luster shine that the wax gives the leather. Really, really beautiful look. Oh, and here's a cool little tip if you use wax often. Just get one of these silicone ice molds. They do a great job of giving you somewhere to put all that melted wax to make little blocks to use for next time. Anyways, with that bottle all sealed up, it's time for the moment of truth. So I headed over to my sink to fill this bad boy up, and it leaked. It leaked pretty much immediately from the seams. But that's okay, because it does two things for me. One, it proves the point that if there's a leak, it's going to leak out of those seams, so I don't really have to worry too much about it getting to the glue first. And two, it's super easy to fix that problem, because you just need more wax. All I did was added just a bit more, and took my time letting it build up along those seam lines. And after that, it held water no problem. In fact, it held 2.5 cups to be exact, which is pretty good considering the standard water bottle carries only 2 cups worth. Not only did the bottle hold, but that seal around the cork held really strong too. I love how this thing came out. I've always kind of wanted one of these little leather water bottles, and now I have one, and it's custom. I made it by hand. I love stuff like this. From here, you can make like a little fancy sling if you want to keep it over your shoulder, or just put it onto your belt loop or whatever. It's pretty cool. Now you can proceed to battle the cursed creatures lurking out in the woods without the ravages of the sun taking you before you ever get a chance to cross swords. Or, you know, have a fun gift for friends or whatever you want to do with it. Now, I hope you liked this project. It was a lot of fun to make, and honestly, it was just kind of something I needed. But let me know in the comment section below if you've ever given this a shot, and if you've done it a different way from the way I've done it. I'd love to see how you go about it. Also, if you like what I do here, why don't you consider giving me some of that like it love, and don't forget to subscribe so you know when I release new content. In the meantime, though, keep leveling up, you. You've made it to the end screen! Thank you so much for supporting this channel. You sticking around this long means everything. Speaking of support, I wanted to give a shout out to our newest high tier level Patreon members. Blake Schuyler, Todd Woods, Nightwolf, and Lacewing joined these people's noble ranks in helping to support this show and honestly make the whole thing work. I could not do any of this without your support, so I really appreciate everything you guys do. If you'd like to join their noble ranks, why don't consider joining, link in the description below. If not, you can just click on one of these videos here and that'd be dope too. Smells so good.